right, good to have you here. You know, what is it? 28 states now have right-to-work laws. Right-to-work laws, and it's interesting because there are politicians in Washington that would like to strip you of that right here in Michigan and the other states across the country. Seems unusual to me, but here we are. Mark Mix is president of the National Right to Work Committee, which is a 2.8 million member public policy organization. He also serves as the president of the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation. Mark, good to have you on the program.
Steve, good to be with you again. Thanks for the opportunity. Interesting times indeed.
Yeah. I see that there's a headline here that says that more Michigan workers are in unions today than before the pandemic. Not quite sure why that is, but I guess you could explain it to me. I'm not surprised by it, but Michigan used to be one of the big union states, not so much anymore.
Yeah, Steve, this is a great story in the sense that, you have a right-to-work state like Michigan where union officials and politicians said it would be the end of the world if you passed a right-to-work law, and yet the AFL-CIO president in Michigan announces that their membership is up, 15,000 members, that their ratio, their density is up to 15.2% of the workforce. This is the argument that we make, or these are the cases we make about right to work. I mean, what happens is union officials actually provide services to workers. Instead of sitting back and taking their money because they can, as a condition of employment for an employee, they go out and provide services. And this story from Michigan Live is kind of interesting. It talks about how unions have been aggressive in going out and helping workers and doing things that workers want. And when you do things that customers want, they usually buy your product. And that's exactly what's happened here in Michigan. Obviously, the COVID situation has caused, lots of things in the workplace that workers are concerned about. But I find the story interesting that this is exactly what we talk about when a right-to-work law passes in this state. And I think it's good news for unions and it's good news for workers, but yet workers have more power now because of the right-to-work law.
Right, but there are those in Washington that don't want that at all. They want to pass federal legislation, as you know, to eliminate the right to work, not just in Michigan, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think there are 28 states that have these laws, right? And they want to get rid of them across the board. I don't know that they have the right to do that or that the law would stand up to scrutiny in the federal courts, but nonetheless, they hate these laws. They think that everybody, you hear them talk all the time. We need good union jobs. It's not just good jobs, it's good union jobs.
Yeah, Steve. Well, I appreciate your optimism. We have 27 right-to-work states right now, but we'll have a 28 before too long. So we'll get to your number, but thanks for the optimism.
There you go.
Yeah, there is a bill in Congress that's already passed the House with no committee hearings, no testimony, that would repeal all 27 right-to-work laws across the country. And, Steve, people ask the question, and you asked the right question, how could Congress repeal Michigan's right-to-work law or the 26 other ones that are in place? Well, the fact is, the privilege to pass right-to-work laws was granted by our, generous Congress back in 1947 after they had taken over private sector labor management relations in the 1930s and given union officials these dramatic new powers. In 1947, they realized it went too far, and they said that if a state, by affirmative action, i.e. what Michigan did back in 2012, could outlaw the closed shop, meaning you're fired if you don't pay dues or fees to a union, they could do it. But it was a blessing and a gift given from the federal government. So the PRO Act, this Bill 842, which is pending in the Senate right now, basically says we're going to take away that little provision that allowed the states to do it. And if they do that, that would wipe out the 27 right-to-work laws across the country. We would certainly oppose it. We would try to litigate it. But what the Congress gives, the Congress can take away. And I suspect this Supreme Court, and who knows what the Supreme Court would do, Steve, might just say, well, look, we had this battle in 1947, and we had the battle in 1935, and we had a case called NLRB versus Jones Laughlin Steel that said this federal power was perfectly fine, and we're going to allow the federal government to control labor relations across the nation. So it would be a fight, but that's what they're planning to do, and they would like to do that if they can get it through the Senate.
Right. And what do you think? How do you forecast that? How do you handicap that?
Well, Steve, maybe you can help us with handicapping. I'll tell you, it's an interesting scene. Obviously, if the Senate rules remain in place, where the filibuster and the extended debate can protect against these radical issues that the regressive left is bringing up, then we can probably protect it. But if they change the rules in the Senate and make it a, quote, simple majoritarian body with a 50-vote margin plus Kamala Harris, then we're in real trouble. But I think a lot of politicians in Washington, despite their Republican or Democrat label, understand the impact of that on several other issues if they go that far.
Right. With me right now is Mark Mix, president of the National Right to Work Committee, which is a 2.8 million member public policy organization. Also serves as president of the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation. I'm going to guess you're going to have your work cut out for you going forward, aren't you? I mean, you really are.
Yeah, indeed. And it's not just the PRO Act and the legislation, it's the regulatory regime. The National Labor Relations Board on August 27th will be wholly owned by union lawyers. The general counsel of the National Labor Relations Board is a union lawyer. They're going to try to expand union power, not employee rights power, Steve. That's important. You got that right in your intro. I mean, it's about empowering union officials to force more workers into unions. And they can do that very successfully at the administrative level and the regulatory level without any legislation. And that has already begun. We've got memos from inside the NLRB that talk about how they're going to overturn several cases that we won at the board over the last 4 years, and simply going back to, look, either pay up or be fired. You know, sign a card and you're in a union. Don't get a vote. You don't get a secret ballot. They're gonna penalize employers for the allegations of unfair labor practice charges, civil penalties against employers. It's really going to be interesting, and we do have our work cut out for us.
I don't see how they can win on any of those fronts, but you know, I'm just some kid sitting here in the middle of farm country. I don't know. I just don't see how they can win on any of those fronts. But you're right. They're going to fight you at every turn because it's about political power. It's about money into the coffers for campaigns and so forth. It's about keeping people, on the hook, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, we just published a study with an institute, a research institute that we have, that showed, and this is just what the unions report, in the last 2 years, union officials spent $1.8 billion. Now, I know that number doesn't shock anybody anymore because that's just a rounding error when it comes to government activity, but $1.8 billion on politics alone. And so the reason why they have to spend that much money is because their power is granted by government. And so you've got to be involved in politics, and they are in the biggest way. I mean, they're bigger than the DNC and the RNC. They're bigger than Soros and the Kochs, and they're bigger than just about anybody on the block because they have to be. Their power is a derivative of government action, except, they don't represent employees per se. They don't win by making great service. They win by having political power, to your point, Steve.
There you go. Mark, good talking to you as always. I appreciate it. Where can people find out more?
Well, they can find us on that amazing internet at nrtwc.org, nrtwc.org.
On that amazing internet. Mark?
That amazing internet, yeah.
Yeah. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.